welcome to FinTalks, a chat with FinanceMalta. As you can see, this time we are not in a studio. We are completely out in a relaxed environment because it is a special edition of this podcast that we are used to for the past year. As many of you know, FinanceMalta is celebrating 15 years of its inception. And as a result of these celebrations, we are in an environment where we're going to have a chat with the three chairpersons that have been at the helm of FinanceMalta in different eras. So let me introduce the first one, who is Mr. Joseph Zammit Tabona, who was the first chairperson of FinanceMalta, followed by Kenneth Farrugia, who spent almost 9 years, right, Kenneth?
Exactly.
And the current chairperson, Rudolph Psaila. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us today. My first question is addressed to you, Joe. In 2004, Malta joined the European Union, and 3 years later, FinanceMalta was set up. Joining the EU helped FinanceMalta, for sure.
Yes.
Can you tell us in what way?
Well, it helped in many ways. One, we had to actually adopt to the legislations that were in place in Europe. So in that respect, it also advanced our economic activity in that sector. I think it should be borne in mind too that although we actually joined the Europe in 2004, Malta joined the Eurozone in 2008. And that obviously gave us further advantages, certainly in the financial service sector. I think what one has to actually bear in mind is why was FinanceMalta actually set up? The reason why it was actually set up was that at the time, in 2004, the MFSA, or the Malta Financial Services Authority, was, besides being the regulator, was also doing most of the marketing. And it was thought that the marketing should be done by private sector. So FinanceMalta was actually initiated around 2006, and it was actually set up in April 2007. And the composition of the actual board was made up of 8 persons, 4 representing the government and 4 persons representing the 7 institutions that existed at the time, with an independent chairman, and I was the first chairman. Actually, Kenneth was my deputy at the time, so Kenneth's been on the board of FinanceMalta. Besides the 9 years that he actually was there as chairman, he was there for another 2 years, because I was there from 2007 to 2009. I was then actually appointed Malta's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland, so I had to then resign, and Kenneth took over from my position. But to answer specifically your particular question, I would say yes, Malta has done extremely well. It has actually grown at an average rate of around 8% per annum since 2009 to date, other than the 2 years of COVID. But until 2019, it has actually grown at a consecutive rate of that 7-8%. It employs around 12,000 people and contributes about €1 billion in revenue.
During, as you're saying, rightly so, the organization itself is quite young. So, and when it was set up, there was also the international financial crisis. What were the challenges and opportunities at the time?
I think the international financial crisis was developed, obviously, in the US, and it was relating to the mortgage crisis, where actually, I think Kenneth can actually probably define it in a better way, in that mortgages were remortgaged 2 or 3 times over, and it was then actually, it was brought to light that the certain actually properties were being applied as mortgages 2 or 3 times over. That created certainly a financial crisis in the US mainly, and it resulted with the collapse of Lehman Brothers on the 15th of September, I think, 2008. To my knowledge, as far as Malta, and if I remember correctly, and I stand to be corrected again by Kenneth, Malta did not lose very much. To my knowledge, I think we lost a few million, about 7 million, I think, at the Bank of Valletta through its investments. But there was actual total collapse, certainly in the US, which then, with the result of Lehman Brothers actually going into liquidation, that actually created other financial collapses. It included also certain accounting firms, which actually went under. One particular one, Arthur Andersen, actually. And obviously, it was a time when people had to actually merge and consolidate their position because of the financial crisis that existed at the time.
Let me shift my question to Kenneth. You were at the helm for 9 years, as we said earlier. Let's start with your first few years as chairperson of FinanceMalta. It was a time where Malta's economy was booming. What opportunities did you embark on so that you can practically milk all this?
I think continuing on what Joe was saying earlier, FinanceMalta's remit was really to position Malta as a financial services jurisdiction outside its shores. And it wanted to do that on the basis that Malta had already developed a domestic industry in a number of areas of the financial sector, of the financial industry. So if you look at the asset management sector, we already had introduced legislation in Malta, which enabled, way back in 1995, which enabled the setting up of a number of asset management companies in Malta, evolved into asset servicing companies. We saw a number of insurance companies being set up in the jurisdiction. So we had really the very solid foundations, but only at the domestic level. Prior to joining the EU, we did see as well a trickle of foreign operators setting up in Malta, predominantly in the asset management space. Some were setting up funds here in Malta. We had a very good fund regime. We also saw a number of insurance companies setting up in Malta. And it was evidently clear from an industry perspective that Malta had the right ingredients in place, if I may use that word, to propose itself as a jurisdiction for international operators in these key sectors. So the first thing that we did is let's define those sectors where Malta has a strong value proposition to attract operators to our shores. And we identified a few of these sectors, so it was definitely the insurance sector, the asset management sector, the family office and family business space as well. Mindful of the fact that when Malta joined the European Union, it benefited from the ability to passport products and services into mainland Europe, right? And that was a big advantage. Apart from the fact that when one looks at the costs of operating in Malta, Malta was definitely very cost competitive, equally adding as well the agility of the regulator at that time.
And so the appetite was there.
So I think we had a very compelling proposition to go outside our shores and propose Malta as a jurisdiction from where one could conduct its financial services business. And we set this out, doing this in a myriad of ways. So first, we identified those jurisdictions that we would be targeting. And some of them were European jurisdictions, the likes of the UK, the likes of Italy, where we felt that there were operators that would be interested in our proposition. But we also looked outside of Europe, because clearly being a member of the EU enabled non-EU operators to set up their base in Malta and target EU jurisdictions through passporting. So let's take, for example, the asset management sector. So they could set up a fund in Malta, and that fund would benefit from the ability to be passported in all EU member states by simply being based in an EU jurisdiction in Malta. The agility of the regulator, the cost of operation in Malta made it even more compelling to do so. So we targeted operators in the US. We looked as well at the Gulf states. And we started then addressing the target audience by looking at gatekeepers. And traditionally, gatekeepers would be the law firms, the audit firms of this world that service clients. We looked at events that were being organized for these specific sectors, so insurance events, asset management events. And we started positioning Finance Malta
internationally.
We started positioning Finance Malta in these venues. And clearly the branding and visibility of Malta as a jurisdiction as a result of all these initiatives started gaining traction, with the result, as Joe highlighted earlier, that we went from an industry which used to contribute just 3% to GDP to contribute to around 11 to 12% of GDP, right, over this period. I think it's important to mention as well that the Finance Malta model was then replicated in other sectors because it worked. Because as Joe said, it's the industry really pushing its value proposition outside our shores. And we saw a number of Finance Malta lookalikes in a number of areas being set up, right? We have Tech Malta today and then Gaming Malta. And I think it works because it brings competitors, literally, together under one roof to promote business to come to Malta.
If I may, actually,
Sure.
I think it all started really around 2003 when we actually set up Malta Enterprise. We actually then went to Ireland to actually use the model of Ireland, and we did the same thing with Finance Malta, where we went again to replicate and see what they were doing, and we more or less copied what's their model.
Yes, absolutely. And we can see that bringing together operators that have an interest in attracting business to Malta, it means that it has flourished. If we look at the asset management sector, we had, I remember, a handful of operators. Today, we have a significant number of asset managers and asset service providers in the jurisdiction servicing the industry. Likewise, if you look at the insurance sector. Now, clearly the proposition was not simply based on Malta being attractive and we're agile and we're cost competitive. It is important to mention as well that the regulator put in place a sound regulatory framework with distinct advantages, right? Which made Malta stand out. Like in the insurance sector, for example, there are specific advantages for the insurance sector. Likewise, in the asset management sector, we introduced certain fund regimes which made it attractive for operators to set up here. And it's all about innovation and how you stand out, when compared to other competing jurisdictions in Europe.
Exactly.
Because
the same thing like what we did in iGaming.
Absolutely. If you look at jurisdictions like Ireland, like Luxembourg, it's all about how innovative your proposition is and its ability to attract operators to the market.
Kenneth, then the last part of your years had some turmoil.
Yes.
Because obviously the financial sector was heavily criticized by various international institutions. What you've just explained of what you managed to do during your first term, how did this then affect both the country as well as your job internationally, because ultimately you had to go abroad and still sell the country?
Look, the criticism was really and truly not leveled at the financial sector. Malta always had a very robust financial services regime in the country. There were issues at national level which clearly permeated the financial sector to a degree. And it's all about, debunking the myths, right, as they say. So it's being out there, being present in the venues where operators meet and discuss financial services teams, and where there are concerns that are aired in this respect, you demystify and you clarify actually what the financial services jurisdiction stands for. And this is what we did during this period. It's not that you cower in a corner and you take the flak. It's being out there and, meeting, and we did organize meetings, and I'm pleased to say that even the political arena joined us in these venues. I remember going to the UK and meeting a number of media houses and having the journalists there and, addressing some of the concerns that were expressed by the media, because you want to ensure that it's fully clear for them what the jurisdiction stands for. And I can assure you there are no issues with the financial sector per se. The issues were around the national incidents that happened in the jurisdiction, which impacted the financial sector.
Rudolph, you've been Finance Malta chairperson for over 2 years.
Yep.
It wasn't a walk in the park.
Definitely.
Let's start with the first aspect, which was the grey listing, and then also the Moneyval report that obviously continued to tarnish Malta's reputation. Let's start with that for now.
Yep.
What did you do what did Finance Malta do to try and show and showcase the country that we are actually not, we should not be blacklisted?
I mean, there's also COVID-19 as well to put into the mix. But
I was going to mention it the second part, because first you had that and then
so,
the pandemic.
The pleasure is yet to come.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, if you look at the FATF report and the fact that Malta was grey-listing, yeah, I mean, initially, everyone was a bit concerned in terms of what we're going to do. But as Finance Malta, we couldn't rest on our laurels and say, all right, I mean, we're grey-listed, and that's it, right? So we had to put more effort, and we had to go out there, because we had to disseminate information that the industry is robust. We had a number of authorities. If you look at in the past 18 months, we had MFSA, MBR, NCC. I mean, they have implemented a number of initiatives.
FIU.
And FIU, exactly. So it's not, the journey is not where you start, it's where you finish. And that's obviously was something that we wanted to tell people out there. So we had developed a number of initiatives. I mean, when I was appointed as chairman, we were planning this strategy for 2020. And we wanted to focus on 5 key initiatives. One is internationalization, because we didn't want Finance Malta to stand on its own. We wanted to develop links, bridges with other foreign authorities. And we did develop a number of bridges. We have an observer status with the World Alliance, which is an association that the members of these associations are entities like Finance Malta. We signed MOU with Abu Dhabi. We have a strategic partnership with Innovate Finance. We are also part of EU Roundtable. And we also signed another agreement with Israel, FinTech. So we're working on internationalization. Then we also wanted to focus on value added, value creation to our members. So we have initiated a number of initiatives like podcasts, like FinTalks, where we invite our members, we give them the opportunity to showcase what they do and to discuss certain things. Yeah. Then we went to digitalization. Little did I know that we're going to rely a lot on that for the next 2 years. Yeah. So 45% of the team at Finance Malta focus on digitalization. So we have upped our social media platforms, the website. I mean, this is something that I will mention when addressing the COVID question. Yeah. Then we also wanted to work with partners. So there is TechMT, FIU, MBR, MFSA, and it was important that we partner with these entities, because going out there and promote the Malta brand, there will be more probability of success if you do it as one team, Malta Enterprise as well. And that, for us, it was important. So we organized a number of joint events with these entities to further promote Malta. So
would you say that what you just said helped also Malta's perception in some people's minds that it is not what it is being said or perceived?
Yes, it helped. And also we have to keep in mind that there was the Manival report, which obviously the test showed that Malta passed the test with flying colors. So it's true that there was a Manival report where we failed, but also recently there was one where we passed the test quite well. There was also positive feedback from the FATF president. There were also positive feedback in the media. So things are changing.
So would you agree with me if I say that ultimately it was a good thing that we had to go through this?
I think
to brush up.
I mean, there were certain things that we had to change, right? And I think we grabbed the opportunity. We worked as one team. So this was not the role or the job of one entity. Yeah, it was the job of a collective effort. A number of entities took part, as also our members, because obviously there were new regulations being introduced, enhanced compliance requirements, And our members had to spend more money and obviously employ more people to comply with these requirements. And this is a journey which does not have a finish line, right? Because we need to continue working on it. It's something that is not going to stop when we are going to become whitelisted. We have to continue building on what we have built so far.
Yeah. The second part was another not walk in the park. There we had COVID pandemic, so I guess the idea of going abroad and showcasing the country could not actually happen physically.
Yes. Yes.
So how did you handle this?
Yeah, and to be honest, I think COVID-19 for FinanceMalta, the fact that FinanceMalta goes out there to promote the jurisdiction, I tend to say that COVID-19 had a bigger impact, because obviously we had to redefine our approach. We had to think outside the box and say, what are we going to do? But considering that one of the pillars was digitalization, we have invested quite a lot on that. So we're focused on our social media platform. We had Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. The members has increased significantly. Today, we post more than one article, for example, on LinkedIn and Facebook a day. So we're putting quite a lot there. We also developed the network. We organize as well the annual conference. Instead of having a physical meeting and networking, we invested in a hybrid option. We organized webinars, FinTalks. So we had to completely think outside the box. But digitalization was key to be able to deal with the challenges posed by COVID.
Doing all this, what was the response then, the feedback?
Oh, the feedback was positive. I mean, for example, I got a couple of statistics. The financial institutions, for example, they increased from 40 to 52 between 2021, right, which is a 30% increase. The gross premium written increase from 2019 to the beginning of 2021 from 4.6 million to around 6.3, another 30% increase. And we haven't witnessed from the feedback that we got that there were any entities that left the country or an exodus of companies that left the country because of grey listing, etc. That's, I was
going to say that was part of the most important thing, really, to try and actually keep all the people that were here. There were certain companies that did leave, but I think we need to continue to actually strengthen and get the needs of the existing companies that are still here.
I mean, the stakeholders put a lot of effort, because you had the NCC, led by Mr. Alfred Camilleri, MFSA, KFNL, FIU, the government, because obviously they had to have the willingness as well of the government, which obviously wanted to ensure that we come out of this grey listing ASAP. And that was important, and it was highlighted as well by the president of FATF.
Even by the business community itself was asking to be out of it.
So everyone was like on the same wavelength.
I just wanted to ask this question to the three of you, and I wanted to start with Joe. In one of his interviews, Rudolph, and I quote, one of his very few first interviews, I must say, was, "In our industry, trust and integrity are everything, and these two attributes are the basis of a good, solid jurisdiction." From your experience, 15 years ago, do you still think that these two ingredients are crucial to this very day?
Still crucial, yes, I am in agreement with that. The way I market things, I do meet a lot of people abroad, but what I'd like to do is to actually bring them down to Malta on a familiarization visit for 36 hours, 48 hours, and depending on who they are, how important they are, they can actually meet up with the Prime Minister, Minister, heads of government entities. I don't think this can be done anywhere else in any other EU jurisdiction. Malta has the advantage that the Prime Minister and ministers and heads of government institutions are all very accessible. And to us, that is a big advantage. And all our potential investors are all surprised that they can actually meet up with these people in a relatively short period of time.
The size of our jurisdiction undoubtedly plays to our advantage, but sometimes those attributes are clouded by perceptions, right? And what's important is to manage those perceptions and ensure that people have the correct picture, because that influences their decision where to base their business, right? We need to remember always that it's innovation that drives our value proposition. And as Rudolph said, when it comes to governance, it's a journey. Same goes with the value proposition. It's a journey, right? And we need to ensure that we continue to innovate. I believe it's the responsibility of the industry to be a driver of innovation, and government and regulatory authorities to be enablers of that innovation. And I think we've come a long way. And considering that Malta was grey listed, and that undoubtedly has an impact on business, right? I'm sure that there are operators that were intended to set up business in Malta that somehow shelved a bit their plans, to see sort of the outcome of this. The writing is on the wall that Malta has come a long way. When you look at the regulators and you look at the changes they have put in place in a relatively short period of time, I think that's a testimony of the agility of this jurisdiction, right? It's like an audit, right? So we were audited, we had some weaknesses, and we set ourselves to address those weaknesses. And I am very confident that, we will have a green report ultimately, because a lot of effort has been expended by the industry and regulators in this space.
Yeah, what I was going to say was basically I think we all need to actually get together and all work for the same goal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a holistic.
I presume you still agree with those two ingredients.
Yeah, my answer was in the rest of the article.
Okay. Okay, so that makes my life easier because I can go for the next question.
We'll include that with this interview.
During my various podcasts with Finance Malta, something common that came out from the experts and the people in the industry is that we need to look into digital currencies. Do you think it's high time to do this?
I don't think that we are prepared for it. For example, I mentioned the banking sector, right? I don't think they are, not locally only, but internationally as well, prepared for that. But there are a number of developments taking place. They're being led as well by the EU. And there are a number of directives which are going to be issued. It's a reality that we are facing. They're going to be with us for the years to come. So we need to embrace change. And we need to see how we can use technology and innovation to be able, obviously, to safeguard and protect the consumer's interests, but also to develop the sector further.
I think when we introduced our legislation, we were too much ahead of the game, quite frankly. So we were really and truly first movers, right, in putting in place a regulatory framework for virtual financial assets and for blockchain is for that. But as Rudolph is rightly saying, the ecosystem, and when I say the ecosystem, not only in Malta, the ecosystem at European level was not yet in place. European regulators were still assessing, the use of virtual currencies. They were obviously concerned with investor protection. It was a new digital currency coming to the fore. There were even concerns expressed by central banks. But now central banks are really, pushing to introduce digital currencies themselves, right? Which I think is a step in the right direction. But it's all about not just introducing the regulatory and legislative framework in isolation. You need, as Rudolph said, the supporting ecosystem around that, right? Whether the acceptance of the European regulators, because we are part of Europe, and equally so, the support infrastructure, particularly of the payment institutions and the banking sector. And I can tell you,
we already have digital banks in the country.
But it's one thing having digital banks and empowering customers to self-service their requirements through digital channels. Here we're talking about the replacement of fiat currencies with digital currencies, which is a different kettle of fish. There were issues around the anonymity of the ownership of virtual financial assets, which is still a concern, particularly given the heightened sensitivity around AML. There were these factors at play which I think dampened the permeation of digital currencies within the market. But there is clearly space for that, and I see that happening because I believe that the global payments infrastructure is so archaic. I mean, if you think about sending a payment, say, from Malta to China, right? So someone goes to a bank, orders a payment, the payment goes from the bank in Malta to its correspondent bank abroad, to the correspondent bank in the Asian region, to the bank of the client. So it goes to at least 4 pit stops, right? When I should have the ease and ability to transfer payment directly to you. Without having to go through these shenanigans. So there are these issues and factors at play. So there is definitely space for digital currencies, in my view, going forward. We just need the enabling ecosystem to be in place.
Unfortunately, we have to close this chat, but I would like to ask one last question. I would like to start with Joe. Where do you see Finance Malta in the coming 10, 15 years?
Well, I think I must actually say that we I don't know if you're aware, but we have actually developed, let's say, the Malta Financial Service Advisory Council. And that actually has developed a strategy for the next 10 years. Now, the strategy is in place. It is in the hands of Minister Caruana. He's actually going through the process of what is referred to as Plan B, which is referred to as the revision on the tax system. Once he's comfortable with that, that strategy is going to be incorporated into our strategy and then passed on to the Minister of the Cabinet of Ministers. I really believe that Malta has a great future. I think the strategy document itself actually has some 200 recommendations. We need to all work together, and I'm very confident that Malta will regain its reputation and move forward in the years to come.
Definitely.
I'm obviously anxious to move this as fast as possible, certainly within the next 12, 18 months to 3 years. And then obviously, I think life, particularly in the financial service sector, is going to change very rapidly for the points actually that are being mentioned by Kenneth, be it the payment system and everything else. So whilst it is a 10-year strategy, obviously change is bound to happen during that particular period.
Yeah. Kenneth?
No, definitely a bright future. I'm very optimistic for the growth of this industry. I think we've come a long way. And that's evidenced by the number of operators, foreign operators already based here. I think obviously the grey listing issue will be behind us within the next 6 to 12 months, in my view. So I think that should allay the concerns of operators to set up in Malta. As Joe said, a lot of work has been done on the strategy document. There was a participation of a number of industry operators through different committees purposely set up for this. And I think we have really, as I said, a bright future ahead of us. I think we have some compelling propositions for the operators out there to come and operate from Malta. Give them the benefits of operating in a highly regulated jurisdiction, a sound regulatory infrastructure, being cost competitive, and more than that, being agile and being innovative.
Yeah. We're small, but we always face the challenges that we had as a country. And we face them because everyone is on board, and we see this as a collective effort. The future is bright. There will be challenges, new regulations, new requirements, but so the past, right? So we always had those challenges. I think it's important that we continue innovating. We need to focus on innovation the way we do business, innovation in terms of new products, innovation in terms of how we deal with investors, with new business, how we can attract more business. But it's also equally important that we invest more in technology. That has to be the future, because technology is going to dominate what we do. And the financial sector is definitely going to be driven by technology. We already have RegTech, we have the insurance tech. The technology is going to be there. And I think when we look at the strategy as well of Malta, the government, the one which was developed by the committee chaired by Joe Zammit Tabona, I think the basis for that is going to be technology.
Thank you, Joe Zammit Tabona. Thank you, Kenneth Farrugia. Thank you, Rudolph Psaila, for coming here. And together with me, we had this chat about the history of Finance Malta and what's the future going to look like for this institution. I would also like to encourage you all to follow this podcast on all the social media platforms that Finance Malta can offer. Thank you very much.